confirmation process. If there was a parcel out there or a dwelling or some improvement out there that we had missed, by the end of our field checks, we've put our eyes on. We're in the process of putting that information into the new system, and that's 48-50%, that data entry edit. But Steve, you may be able to comment on whether we picked up something that we just didn't know about, an entire parcel, for example. Right. I'm unaware of that. It certainly would be a mistake on our part. Sometimes they're there and the process hasn't taken place to where we're actually seeing it and recording it. That may be months. But as far as missing something altogether, Steve, have you seen something?
Right. I mean, realistically, from a county standpoint, from what I've seen so far, the county's records are fairly accurate for the most part. I think they do an excellent job with permits and getting those improvements and getting those additional dwellings or those additional, type structures picked up. I haven't really noticed anything as far as when I'm looking at each individual parcel. I haven't noticed entire missing buildings for that matter, or as far as the new construction goes, like I said, and a majority, I would say a majority of those additions to the dwellings, sheds, porches, canopies, carport, maybe they might have enclosed a garage. For the most part, from what I've seen, those have been accounted for. I have noticed some buildings that have been raised, some improvements that we've removed from the parcels in certain areas, but for the most part, overall, I think the county's doing a real good job acknowledging those improvements and listing those. Most of the things, as John mentioned, the improvements that we're finding are minimal in value. Sheds, small additions, maybe someone added a wood deck that they had not visited the property in previous years, and maybe they added it without a permit. That happens quite a bit, where there will be things added without a permit. Those are the kind of things that we're finding. So. And
do you, in your experience in other communities doing the same kind of work, are we pretty much in line? I mean, we're not. You're not finding lots more here than you would find somewhere else.
That's why I said it from a data standpoint. Look at now that we've had a chance to do a once through with the data is actually pretty good.
Good.
Considering the fact that you've only got 35% of all the improved parcels in the county had anything remotely wrong with it, with some type of edit or change that needed to be done to the parcel after we've done the once over, is pretty good.
Great, so. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to go back to the numbers again. The 69,507. I'm assuming that includes commercial, industrial, manufacturing properties.
Yes, sir. That number includes all real properties.
All assessed properties. And then the 35, when you send that email, if you could give me a little more detail on how you arrived at that number. Is that the total residents?
That is and the 35,014, that is a 2015 number of how many homestead exemptions we have on real property. By and large, that's going to be residential.
Well, I wanted to know what the total residential properties are and then how many are on homestead. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, so you want me to exclude the commercial?
Yes, please.
Well, I want a breakdown on everything, and then I'll give you.
I'll make sure that's included.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
I'll make sure that's
I want
fine.
everything.
Just kind of looking to see. I mean, it's kind of fuzzy when you say 69,507 and then 35, so roughly half have homestead, but that's not the total picture. I mean, we need to exclude the industrial, commercial, and that kind of thing to get the accurate picture of.
Right, and because I want clarification, and I didn't bring my notes with me that I took when I met with you, but I recall, and Councilor Henderson was saying based on garbage collection we got, but what I recall is it seems like there were 53,000 residential properties. And you talked about the percentage of edits and all that. So I'd like a breakdown. Certainly we have more than 35,000 residential properties.
Oh, yes, sir. That's just with homestead.
And so I wanted to be clear that there's about 53,000, 55,000 residential properties in Muskogee. And then he broke all of that down for me when I met with him. And so I want you to have.
Well, I would have loved to have that information, and if there's a way you could tell when that property changed, when the new owner took over, if on those 25, roughly 25 that do not have homestead, are they in the queue where they have to wait a year before they file for homestead? I mean,
We won't know the 2016 number of homestead until that deadline in April for 16, of course. But
okay.
As the city manager said, we have it broke down: residential, commercial, industrial, residential condo. We have it stratified pretty well.
If you want to wait till after the deadline to compile the information, that would be
I'll give you what we have now,
okay.
and then we can do it again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and Councilor Henderson.
Just a quick question. Do you also have access to how many of those residential properties are owner occupied? Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is what percentage of the non-homestead exemption are homeowners that have elected because they're residents in a state that doesn't pay state tax, but they've made a decision not to file for homes. I'm just curious what that number is. You don't retain those numbers, do you?
I can't answer that question today, but I
Okay.
will find out the answer.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. Let's see, we have Councilor Davis.
Good afternoon. I have a somewhat different request from you. I believe it'd be your department that would look into these matters, but could you provide for council somewhat of I guess you can call it a management tool or just an understanding so we know what is what the next several years are projected to be like. And you might want to get with the finance department and talk to them. They may have additional requests. But could you provide us a report specifically as it pertains to tax abatements and expiring, whether it's this year for the next 5 to 10 years, so we can kind of get an understanding of what new revenue might be coming into the city and what we can expect. The other is a request. I'm not sure if you can do it or not, but could you provide, say, the last 5 years? I would prefer 10 if you could do it, of the amount of land that's come off the tax rolls for whether nonprofit organizations out there that on the opposite side of the revenue that we've somewhat lost in property taxes.
Yes, sir.
You can do that?
I can.
Okay, that would be your department that works on that
It
stuff.
is. As a matter of fact, the first that you asked for, we're in the process of doing now. It's a task that was given to me last week. So
Okay.
I'm working on that as we speak. And the second one you asked for, we've talked about it in the office before. I know it's some information that would be nice to have. But yes, sir, I can get that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I found out, I asked Richard Bishop a question, and I found out that if a nonprofit or government agency like Columbus State has property, but they receive rent for that property, then they have to pay property tax on it.
Ma'am, that is governed by law. When you have a tax-exempt property, regardless of who owns it, you look at the purpose of that exemption and why they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And any additional land, it could be a church with a rental house.
Mm-hmm.
If that rental, or if that house is occupied by staff of that church, and that's part of their package for employment, that's not taxable. If they in turn rent that out for additional income that's not directly aligned with the purpose of their exemption, then that becomes something that has to be approved. And if it's not in accordance with the reason they're exempt, it's going to be taxable.
Okay. I was surprised.
And that's a real quick summary on a real thick law. So I hope that's okay.
Looks like that's it.
Well, and Madam Mayor and council, my purpose really of meeting with Betty and John was in advance of, not this budget, but, well, partly this budget, but budgets going forward, because I was a bit anxious to see all these findings that were going to bring revenue to the city of things that were not on the books. And a couple of things I learned from meeting with them is that there's great communications between our inspections and codes and permit system and the tax assessor's office. They have access to permits that are pulled where people are doing things adding value to their property, and then they are on it. And what I found is that most of what they're finding out there was already on the books, and as he mentioned, there are minor edits. And so I asked John and Betty for the bottom line, should we expect this considerable growth in revenue from this process? And he let me down when he told me no. And so I wanted you to have the benefit of his early report and early projection that based on the minor edits, as he indicated, a shed that they didn't show on the property that's not going to add value, but minor edits, based on that, just at this point, we are not expecting, they are not expecting that at the end of the day, there's going to be significant growth in the digest as a result of what we're doing. But so I wanted you to know that now. And so if you're waiting and can't wait for January 1, 2017, when they switch the system over from OASIS to IAS World and the calculations occur, and you think it's going to be significantly more in IAS World than in OASIS, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So I just wanted you to just know that early. And so we'll get you the information that he shared with me, and I took notes, and so he'll give me the more current information. I met with them about a month ago, but I wanted to get them on the agenda to come and let you hear from them and ask questions, and you walk away with a little bit more work to do.
Always, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Might I add, if I can, when I told you we can't not anticipate a significant growth based on this project, what we do know is we will have an extremely accurate assessment of every parcel in the county. So properties that we may not have seen for years because they've been homesteaded, nothing's been added or removed from the property, it's just been there at its assessed value. We'll know as of 1/1/17 exactly what every parcel is worth in the county. That alone, it makes our job an A+ rating, just because we now know we're accurate. Somebody stood up here today and said one of our primary objectives was to increase assessments. I'm sorry, that's not our goal. Our goal is to be accurate, uniform, fair, and equitable. So we don't lean either way. It is an accurate assessment that we're looking for, and that's what this is going to provide us. So that alone should be encouraging, because there should be values that were different when they were assessed compared to now.
Yeah. And just finally, let me say that when I met with Betty and John, I know that Betty Middleton is happy to have him, and I'm happy to have you on board, because he's doing great work. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move to police pay reform. HR Director Rita Hollowell.
And as Retha comes forward, I asked her to make this presentation. As you all remember, last year as part of the budget, we did a police pay reform to recognize longevity and to begin to address compression and to encourage our valued men and women at the police department to stay with us within existing funds. And we made some projections as to how much that would cost us and whether or not we would be within existing budgeted funds. And the news is good. And so Pam is going to make that presentation, I believe. And then I also asked Retha to conduct a broad study of police pay across many comparable jurisdictions. And she's going to present that information. Pam.
Yes. We looked at, when we were doing the police pay reform last fiscal year, one of the things that we projected was the amount of savings that we would have in other areas of the police department pay in order to provide the pay reform. Two components we looked at. One was overtime. In the last two fiscal years, FY14, overtime was $533,000, and in FY15 was $569,000. FY16 year to date, they've spent $102,000, projected to be approximately $175,000 for the end of this fiscal year, which is a savings of about $400,000 just in the overtime component. The other thing we looked at was court appearances. We budgeted $155,000, which was what we've budgeted over the last several years. To date, they've expended $60,866, projected to be approximately $100,000 for this fiscal year. Which is a savings of $50,000. So the two savings between overtime and court appearances is about $450,000, which is real close to what we had estimated in the police pay reform restructuring proposal that was approved by council in this fiscal year. So we're within $50,000 of where we thought we would be for that police pay reform and being able to pay for that out of existing dollars in the police department.
Okay. Thank you. Retha, do you want to walk us through this police survey, please?
Sure. The survey that Human Resources conducted in conjunction with the Columbus Police Department, we looked specifically at their pay and their benefits. Those were the primary things that we concentrated on. And there are parts of the survey that are very involved, so I won't go into all the details. This is just going to be at a very high level, but the report you have in front of you that you can take and look at, and then certainly ask questions if there are additional questions that we've not answered in the survey for you. First, just looking at where we are with the Columbus Police Department. Our city population at 202,824. There are 488 budgeted police officer positions. This is less 53 vacant positions, and that number may be a little bit higher. It's edging closer to 60 vacant police officer positions right now. Other budgeted positions include the 911 center and civilian positions within that department. Of those budgeted 488 positions, this slide just shows a breakdown of how those positions are distributed via the ranks in terms of the number of police officers, corporals, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, majors, and then certainly the chiefs. Police pay. The starting pay for a police officer with a high school diploma or GED is at $36,700, an associate's degree at $37,500, a bachelor's degree at $38,800, and with a master's degree is at $40,0600. And this does include the loss that each sworn officer will receive. In addition to their base salary and the loss, there are other supplemental pays that the officers receive, and this is just a breakdown of that. That includes the sign-on bonus and the pay reform that you all approved and was implemented in 2015. It also includes relocation expenses as well as the education incentives. police officers, sworn officers. Also, benefits include a take-home vehicle. In terms of promotion within the department, this shows their rank structure basically and how officers advance the career ladder or advance in the department and the upward mobility that's available to them. I won't go through that in any detail. You know, as I mentioned, it goes through the rank structure from corporal, sergeant, command sergeant, lieutenants, captain, and major, and certainly up to the chief. So that's just the promotion career ladder for that department. This slide gives an overview of the turnover rate within the department. It's a look back at the past 8 years from 2008 to 2015, showing the number of officers that were hired, retired, resigned, that were terminated, and deceased. Just looking at 2015, in 2015, 49 officers were hired, 13 retired, 54 resigned and left for some other reason. 1 was terminated, 1 deceased, with a negative balance of 20 for that particular year. If we look at 2008 through 2015, we see those numbers increasing. For example, in 2008, 33 left, and that number has continued to increase, as we said, to 2015, where a total of 69 officers actually left the department. When officers leave the department, there's a natural inclination to want to know where these officers left, where did they go to, why did they leave. This just shows a breakdown of some of the different agencies that those officers went to and the salaries associated with that. As you'll see that a number of the officers stayed within Muskogee County. Some of them were interdepartmental transfers, transferring to the sheriff's office, to the marshal's office. Some of them stayed within Muskogee County, as I said, going to Fort Benning, to Columbus State University, and to LaGrange, while others went to a lot of other places in Georgia, in Florida, in Alabama, you'll see there. Now, this is one of those slides, and there will be a number of this that does a comparison of the salary and benefits information. We want to see how Columbus stacked up against other agencies, and we looked at a total of 21 agencies in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. So it's a total of 21 agencies, and we compared their salaries as well as the benefits. And that's what the next several slides will show in detail. We went and just looked at the salary comparison as we moved forward. And when we looked at how Columbus compared to those other 21 or so agencies in terms of the salary and benefits, Columbus fares well. It is not, certainly is not going to be at the top, but we're not at the bottom. We're in the middle there. So there's certainly room for improvement as we look at other like agencies. These other slides are just additional comparisons of looking at the same data. The last slides here look at the agency comparison in terms of 3 different things: the population, the number of budgeted officers, and the officer-to-citizen ratio. We looked at the same 21 agencies. And Columbus, in terms of the 3 components that we looked at, Columbus looks most like Augusta in terms of the population, budgeted officers, and citizen ratio. We look most like Augusta, Montgomery, and Mobile. And again, I know this is a lot of information, but I don't want to try to go through it in great depth to you. I have had another question that was asked, and we are working on a response for that in terms of the 100 police officers that was allocated. What percentage of those have we filled and have separated? Where are we there? So we'll have that information and be able to provide it for you at another time. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
All right. And also to let you all know, as you begin to ask your questions, I will be contacting each of you, whether you want to do it on phone or private. I want to run a few ideas by you to adjust police pay, again, similar to what we did before, in using the reallocation of existing funds. And the chief and I have been working on it a while. I want to thank Pam and Retha for their help as well. And I think they've come up with something that is frankly more than the seed of an idea. And I would hope that if we continue to work through it and it looks as promising as it currently does, to perhaps put it in the budget letter. So I want to get your input as we go forward looking into these numbers. And I also would want Retha to come back at our 4th Tuesday meeting this month and present the proposal to council so we can get some input, 4 weeks prior to my budget letter and make any adjustments at that time so that we have the best proposal possible. Councilor Allen.
Mayor, I was talking with some folks the other day, and they asked me what's the cost of benefits of employees. So I guess what's the number we use? When we hire somebody, we know what the set salary is or salary grade. What's the number we use to associate?
The number that we use is 65 or 50
percentage of
cost per employee for benefits.
What's
What
the,
we're using.
what's
We have
the
been
dollar
using
amount
50.
that we associate with that? Is it?
That's just for insurance. It's not a percentage because the health insurance is a flat amount, and then retirement and FICA is a percentage. So it's,
What do we use when we compile our budget? What number do we
We
use?
use a
We used to
percentage.
use $5,800, if I remember right, years ago.
for health insurance is $5,650,
Okay.
and then we'll have a percentage for FICA, which is 7.65%, and life insurance is 0.5%. And retirement depends on whether you're general government or public safety, and it ranges from 16% to 22% of salary.
So it's different based on salary, but the,
It's not a percentage.
Pam,
Excuse me.
the insurance amount is
It's
the
a
same
fixed
for
amount.
all.
Yes.
But then when you calculate all of the other benefits, it's based on pay, and you can give the percentage for FICA and all that other
Yes.
stuff. And then the value of the sick leave and the value of vacation time is based on their pay. So can we do some examples and just
Yes.
of different pay?
That'd be
I think
fine.
that would be helpful.
And there's no rush on it.
Yeah.
I was just
Some,
Different.
yeah.
Well, it would be good for recruiting, too, to be able to tell someone your salary is X and the value of your benefits would be
Yeah.
$8,000 or whatever, yeah. Okay, let's see, we have Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. And in an effort to just provoke some thought here, I think there's always been a concern, from what I've heard, that we train officers and then they turn around and go in different directions, and that's always been somewhat of a problem, even though it's an open market out there at this point. And I think in understanding this, I don't have to remind everybody that we have a need right now. We have a need, and the need happens to be in the police department. And I think from a priority standpoint, providing that 911 assistance and patrol and safety out in the community, I mean, this is something that we really have to work at. And it's always somewhat concerned me that when officers sign up and they go through the program, that as soon as the training is over, everybody heads in different directions, specifically speaking, intergovernmental. That's a concern. I'm also thinking about, as athletes, when athletes sign on, sometimes they sign multi-year contracts. Not so sure that you can do that here, and I really don't understand the laws in that area to tell you what you can and can't do, but it seems like if someone signs up for a task that possibility that you can somewhat get your money's worth out of them, or at least they'll stay around for a period of time and fill the need within your community. I'm not so sure on what can and can't be done there, but I think within our government that if we have a need in a specific area, that we need to start thinking of ways, creative ways that we can deal with that need and to solve that issue that's there, and to keep, for lack of a better term, to keep the competitiveness within our government out of it. It shouldn't be there because you've got one department that's training everybody for their need and to meet the need of a specific task that we're falling short in, but yet they tend to go in a different direction, and often it's because it's somewhat of a, the hours are different, their schedules are different, and maybe the task might not be so complicated. And I'm not saying that public safety as a whole, that it's a very difficult job, but I think in reference to the police department and 911 response officers out on the streets, I think everybody would agree, even public safety, that it's a different job. It's a totally different job. So, Madam Mayor, I don't know if this is in your part of what you've been working through or thinking about, but certainly I think that we need to start having that conversation and maybe trying to understand better ways to meet the needs. I don't think it's necessarily pay, although that's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. But I think that maybe we need to reshift responsibilities and commitments in such a way that we're meeting that need and providing that safety for the citizens that they're requesting.
Good points.
Because you're just running, you're chasing your tail, just running in circles a lot of times. And I remember there's some years that we lost a lot of officers, but it's been within the government. They just chose to go to
another department that didn't take 911
an opening
calls.
comes available, and hey, I'll just go over there. It's everything's the same. It's equal.
Well, it's actually the pay's a little bit more.
Sorry?
The pay is more in the sheriff's department than it is in the police department.
That's what I'm hearing. I think we're learning
and that'll be
understanding
something we can go through too and sort of show. I think we had that last time we had this discussion, so we have some of those numbers. But I think Councilor Davis, that's a great point, and those are things that we're working on. And we'll bring back some suggestions, and if you all have other suggestions, we'll certainly follow up on them. But we do at least want to stop losing our officers, obviously, after we train them, stop losing them to other internal departments, certainly. And we also want to position ourselves to start getting other people's trained officers. Perhaps they have a spouse that is transferred to Columbus and may want to work for the Columbus Police Department. So we want to position ourselves to be able to take advantage of officers that someone else has trained.
Well, and that, it's a very complicated subject, but we're in challenging times right now. That I can say I don't think that I've ever experienced since I've been on serving the citizens and city government, and I think as well as from the management side. The world's changing, and we still have to provide the needs to the citizenry. So, there may have to be change that comes along with that, and it may not be easy, but I know in the past that there's always been somewhat of a maybe that you hear that word parity all the time or balance across the board, but in challenging times you may have to think a little bit different to meet those needs that we're falling short in right now. So it may have to be, there may be some differences that need to be explored. People are not going to like it. There may be various departments and offices that might not like it, but you get to the point where you have no choice to meet those needs and to fill the gaps.
Good point. Councilor Thomas.
Ms. Hall, two things. One, on the slide that is former officers, where you list the locations to where some of these folks have gone. Excuse me. What is the time period for that?
That was over a 3-year period.
So in 3 years, we've had one officer go to Columbus State. Is that what that says?
Yes. And again, This is based on the officers that we were able to track where they actually went.
Do we
As a-
do an exit interview?
The police department
Police
does,
department
yes.
does. One of the things that this is very good information, very interesting information, and one of the things that I would suggest to you is that we share this information with, one of the first ones that comes to mind is the FOP. You know, here's what we've compiled, you may want to know this, and other entities that may be interested. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I was told, for example, that one of the reasons that a lot of our officers go to Harris County is the pay's better. Well, not according to this. You know, there may be another reason why we have 8 officers who've gone to Harris County, but certainly it's not the starting salary. And so to correct some of those kinds of things that may be out there, and I don't know who else that you may need to share it with, but I would hope that it would make its rounds so that people would see what kind of comparison we're talking about and that things are not quite as dire as sometimes we are told. I know, too, that one of the things I check every time we get a financial report is how many officers we have that are being paid out of the OLOST. And this time it's 94. We have 94 officers out of the 110 that are authorized, I think. You know, and that number goes up and down depending on, you know, that sort of thing. So I just hope that we can do whatever we need to do. Be sure that our media folks get this. And maybe it will spark something somewhere to do some kind of a story on what is actually happening according to our survey. Good job.
And Retha, maybe we can give it its own, post it on the website somewhere where it has its own link so we can share it. I think that it starts a good conversation. I got to tell you, I'm surprised that Greenville, South Carolina's starting salary is $35,000. I mean, Greenville, South Carolina is a very complex, sophisticated city, urban environment. And one of the things we have to think about when we're comparing ourselves to these other communities is that we are a very dense population-wise. We have a traditional urban core. And so it makes the work of the police department is very intensive here in Columbus, as it is in some of our comparable cities like Augusta and some of the others you've seen in this presentation. And it's unlike some of our more rural neighbors. And so it could be that they're making professional or lifestyle type choices where they're not as intensive police work, not as many 911 calls, that type of thing. But those are good comparisons to make because there's many that stick out to me. As Counselor Thomas said, Harris County sticks out to me, but the fact that Greenville, South Carolina is so much lower. And then when you show that bar chart, not so much lower, but lower, I should say. And when you show that bar chart, it's also interesting to see who falls below Columbus as well. So anyway, thank you. Good job. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
The final update is non-conforming dumpsters. Planning Director Rick Jones and Will Johnson.
Good afternoon. We're going to go through this not rapidly, but we just want to touch on some ideas here and so forth. You may recall the end of last calendar year, we had a gentleman come forward and complain about an issue about a dumpster around the historic district not being enclosed, and he was citing basically the Unified Development Ordinance. There is a provision that requires those dumpsters that were in existence prior to 2005, they should also have be enclosures as well. This section 4.21 is in the UDO. It does talk about that. It does require that they be screened, they be properly placed, and they can't be in the public right of way. That's what the ordinance calls for today, even for those that were in existence prior to us adopting the UDO back in 2005. It has to be screened on all four sides. It has to have gates. It has to be screened with materials that are the same architectural style, basically in terms of that. The screening enclosure has to be kept in good repair, has to be a minimum height of 6 feet, and the dumpsters are to be placed on a hard surface. And this gives you an idea of what the dumpsters should look like. And we will say at this point now that a business that now comes in and requires a commercial dumpster today has to meet all these criteria no matter what. You can see that, and we'll show you some examples of that in just a second, but they do have to meet all this criteria, particularly the idea of screening with the same or like materials of the existing building or proposed building that's going to be built. So it does blend in or comply with the area itself. These non-conforming dumpsters we talked about here talks about the fact that it should be in compliance with regulations at that time, no later than 18 months from the effective date of this UDO. That was back in 2005. And again, it talks about the materials of those being or using concrete, fieldstone bricks, stucco, or wood, whichever the case may be. But the idea was, again, you had to screen those off just like you would any other dumpster in the community. Back in March of 2006, during a work session, we talked about we had a presentation on the UDO that talked about going into effect in April of that year. That time, Deputy City Manager Arrington mentioned about the fact about the existing conditions and what we had to meet with the screening of those business. Council at that time gave us some concerns and feedback about the fact about having to deal with rodents and odor, the owner information, the lack of enforcement, eliminating the gate on all three sides. Those are some of the comments we heard in terms of actually putting this ordinance into play about what happens with that. We also had to bring in and confer, of course, with the waste industry itself, those folks that actually had to go by and pick up the dumpster and empty them on a regular basis as well. The referral from that time from the mayor was to study and bring back a report of the screening of the existing nonconforming. In that time frame between April and July, the planning department, along with inspection and codes and public works, we did our research on alternatives to the current language in that. We also met with representatives from the waste industry on that, and the alternative language and text was sent to planning advisory from that standpoint. On August 2nd of 2006, we came to you and made a presentation about the non-conforming dumpsters with the idea that the applicability of what we're talking about would apply to trash areas, dumpsters, recycling bins, compactors, outdoor storage, all of that is really visible from a public street. In other words, if you could see the dumpster, it had to meet. Our idea was it had to meet this criteria. We also proposed at that time that it have a minimum screening be a screen on three sides, because again, in terms of trying to accommodate some of these dumpsters in some of these areas, the waste facility truck could not get to the dumpster adequately if we had to screen it on all four sides in dealing with that. We talked about the materials we recommended at that time. And then we also were recommending at that time as well that you make sure that the dumpster the front of that dumpster could not be seen from the public street. You had to turn it away from the public view from that standpoint. And we made that effective date of June of 2007, give everybody come into compliance with that. And then we talked about again that, and then we talked about again if we went to an expansion, what it would do in terms of how to meet compliance and all that good stuff from that. PAC came back to us when we made that recommendation and basically rejected the staff proposal and made concerns about from opponents, those folks that had to actually come into compliance with this issue in dealing with it. And then PAC recommended denial of our recommendation back to council. PAC recommended and approved an alternative amendment which said basically that all existing non-conforming dumpsters shall be grandfathered in and considered legal. And that's where the PAC left it off. In September of 2006, we came back to council, made this presentation on our recommendation, the planning department's recommendation, and basically going back in and screening it on three sides on that. Again, we had numerous individuals come and speak against that proposal, saying they'd like to just leave the non-conforming use as it was from that. Some of the council concerns and opinions we heard were like the specific troublesome areas. We wanted to represent it again in October of that year. Undue burden and expense, lack of enforcement, variances are offered, current dumpster maintenance, and then we wanted pictures of dumpsters themselves. At that time, the mayor asked for a delay. Councilors asked to hold off on enforcement until another work session could be conducted in October of that year. Officially, the council asked for a 2-month delay, and motion passes with 6-2. And then the same council requested that affected parties be allowed to speak at the next work session. Dumpster session is not placed on the October work session for whatever reason. It just never materialized, and the second reading was never heard. So we basically went through all this, but we never really reached a decision, or a final decision anyway, in terms of that. This is some of the existing conditions we're having to deal with now today out there. We live. This is behind the St. Mary's Road Shopping Center from Matilda Lane. That's on the backside of that little strip center as it sits there. This is back behind Cross Country, but you can see this dumpster from a public street, from a public right-of-way. So these come to compliance from that standpoint. Same thing about this one at Cross Country as well, just sitting out there really in the middle of the parking lot. This is at a Cross Country restaurant, where again, for the most part, it is sitting out. It's just sitting out there in the parking lot. It's green, but there's no screening or anything else from it, from that standpoint. This is something that the more things we run into more frequently, more commonly, are existing uses like this, these apartment buildings on MLK, where they have nowhere to put a dumpster. There's just no place for it. So they have to either put on their property, of course, but again, it's where they can make sure that truck can get to it as well. And those apartments have been out there forever and ever for the most part, and so they're just having to accommodate as best they know how. This is the one we had complained about, or is the next one?
This is the next one.
The next one. This is one down in the historic district. This can be seen from 3rd Avenue. I guess they could close those gates if they wanted to, but for the most part, they keep them open because the truck comes sporadically or whenever to make that happen. This is behind St. Elmo Shopping Center from the public right-of-way. In terms of, again, you can see where the curb line is in the back of those buildings. They don't have a whole lot of space to put a dumpster and properly maintain it or whatever if you have to go in there and gate it up and whatnot. This is the one we're talking about from the gentleman came and complained to us about. This is sitting out there in the parking lot. This one we think could be accommodated in terms of providing some screening and so forth if they so desired, but that's where it looks like from that. This is at Linwood and 13th. From that standpoint, same thing. Again, the availability of property and where they could actually put that dumpster and have it serviced for the most part. This is down the CRD area itself from Broadway. You can see the dumpster in the back of that side on that. This is down in the Liberty District. Again, availability of land in some cases as to where they can put these dumpsters and have them serviced. This is the triangle up here at River and Manchester. This one just sits out there by itself from that. This is along Hamilton Road. Just another example from that standpoint. And again here at Milton Court, where there's a dumpster right here in the back of that. It still can be seen from the public right-of-way, but it's in their parking lot from that. This is at Warm Springs and 185. Just to the right of that little green dumpster, of course, is the interstate itself. So they're right up against the interstate, and not a whole lot of availability, again, for them to do that. This is out on Armour Road, with the dumpster sitting pretty much off to the side here, but still it's visible. Britt David and veterans. This is the annex. We have screened ours, so we're good in that regard. This is what you're seeing, though, since 2006, when the UDO actually went into play here, what we're requiring. This is what we're seeing now. These are dumpsters that have to meet the ordinance as is written today. They have to be the same or like materials for the building the principal building being built, and that's what's happened here from that. This is behind the Moe's Southwest Grill out there on Whittlesey. Those gates are open right now, but everything around it is built exactly like the building itself. The same thing for Carrabba's out there in terms of material. This is the Olive Garden. It's designed really to blend in with the building so that you really cannot determine so much where the dumpster actually is, and it's not unsightly to the area. This is TGI Fridays. You can see how well that is incorporated into that building itself. The shops at Bradley, same thing. Based on everything that we're talking about, we still feel like if we want to go forward with this and deal with those non-conforming dumpsters, we go back to our original recommendation back in 2006, which is basically you maintain those three sides and direct it away from the public view, if we want to go that route. And that's where we want to stand with that, and that's what our recommendation is back to you today. I'm just not sure that if you ask everybody to fully agree to going in and closing on all four sides and doing everything else like you would do with a new business, that we're going to get a whole lot of compliance in that. We're going to have a whole lot of aggravation, really. But we do think that the very least we need to do is at least screen it off on three sides.
Okay, we've got Councilor Henderson.
Rick, I don't disagree. I kind of like the idea I did when you all brought it. It's just really hard to implement with some of these folks. But there were a few up there that it really looked like they just didn't have any ability. They didn't have any space. And some of them were even on the right-of-way. I mean, what would be the contingency for that? You just mandate that they fix it, or do we try to do
I think
variances?
If you go forth with our recommendation, I think what we're going to find out is we're going to have those, like you say, that cannot comply.
Right.
And then that would have to actually be taken to BZA for a hardship case in that regard. How many of those we're going to have, I couldn't say. But I think we're going to see a real jump in that number when we go through this process. So it's just something we got to deal with from that standpoint.
And I guess my thought is that we would move forward in a way that Director Jones is talking about. But if there is just, I mean, we got to be reasonable and accommodating. And if they simply can't comply because of situations that we saw on the screen, then they would go through a process to get a variance. And I don't know necessarily that because we're looking back and not forward that we should charge them for the variance process when we know they can't comply and we're telling them, but you got to have something documented from us as a variance. But with the naked eye, we see that you can't comply, and so we would be asking them to go through a variance process that if they don't get it, then there's something drastic is going to happen. And so we look forward and not back. But if we know that they've got the space and property needed that they can do it without a variance, then they got to do it, would be my thought.
We have Councilor Thomas. Oh, excuse me, Councilor Huff.
Yes. Will there be any meetings? Can we set meetings to meet with the business community to discuss it?
We can have those, Counselor, if we so desire. We have not really got that far in our thought process. Of course, the next step would be to actually run through the normal process in dealing with any type of change to the UDO. But we certainly at the same time could provide some public meetings or whatever, or at least reach out to these folks again, particularly not only the business owners that have to run these deal with these dumpsters, but the companies that have to service them as well. Make sure they understand what we're trying to achieve here. And so, yes, we'd have to go through that process to make this work, though.
Okay, because the city manager was mentioning variances and things of that nature. All that could be kind of hashed out in some of those meetings. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right. We have Councilor Barnes.
I believe we're going in the right direction on this here. But as the city manager said, I think that because we are moving forward, that we do have something in place because there's obviously, just looking at some of the pictures that we saw, it's going to be imposed an extreme hardship on some of those businesses. And being that we are moving forward, I do like your recommendation for us to maybe play it by ear or try to work something out. If we can see that individuals can, then we insist on them making a change. But then you have to keep in mind the businesses that have been operating under this here, to be a little bit reasonable. If we can see and work with them and see that they cannot affect change, that we kind of work with it. I like what you were saying, Isaiah, in that regards, because I think that's being reasonable.
Well, we'll start moving the process forward, set up meetings, and but I guess we'll have to get your concurrence before we go to the meeting related to variance, whether we can waive the fee, and if they have the space to do it, then we require that they do it so that we can have all that settled by the time we start having these meetings. So we might have to come back to you and at least talk about variances before we start having meetings. So we'll do that. Madam Mayor, that concludes my agenda for today.
Okay. All right. That will put us into the clerk's agenda. Madam Clerk.
Madam Mayor and members of council, on the clerk's agenda, have several items of information. Item 1 is a memorandum from me advising of upcoming board vacancies. Items 2 through 6 are biographical sketches of individuals that are nominated or would like to be nominated for our boards. Item 7 is a certificate of need application from St. Francis Health LLC. They want to establish a new special purpose mega voltage radiation service. Items 8 through 10 or temporary street closing applications for various events throughout the city has already been approved by the police department. It's just for the council's information.
We've got a motion and a second that our minutes be received. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our board appointments, on the Civic Center Advisory Board, Council District 1, Mr. Walter Lewis is not eligible to succeed himself. We'll need another replacement from Councilor Barnes. For District 2, Mr. James Wilcoff has been nominated to serve on another board. District 7, Mr. Jim Irving will need a nominee from Council District 7. On a circle commission.
Okay, we've got Councilor Davis.
Madam Clerk, for District 2, the Civic Center Advisory Board,
Yes.
I think I gave you Alton Russell last week, the last meeting.
Okay. He can be confirmed because it's additional.
We've got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Councilor Davis, would you restate the?
Alton Russell for District 2.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our circle commission, we still need nominees for these 2 seats that were declared vacant a couple of months ago. On our Community Development Advisory Council, Mayor is nominating Ms. Tricia Levin. She can be confirmed.
Llewellyn, there's a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
District 2, Mr. Jack Hayes, he is not eligible to succeed himself, as well as Ms. Gladys Ford, who represents District 4. District 8, Ms. Shahid is not interested in serving again, as well as Mr. Colin Martin, who represented District 9. On a Crime Prevention Board, Mr. Joseph LeBranch, Mayor's nominee for Fort Benning Liaison, can be confirmed.
A motion and second for approval. All those in favor, please state aye.
On our Development Authority, we've outlined these 3 seats. Mr. William Taylor, I understand he does not want to serve again. And then Mr. Heath Shondameyer has been nominated for Stella Boholt's seat, as well as Mr. Fernando Verdri. Now, Mr. Shondameyer was nominated at our previous meeting, so he can be confirmed.
Okay, we've got a motion and second for approval. All those in favor, please state aye. Councilor Henderson, did you have something?
I did. I had a nominee for Mr. Taylor's seat, Jason Cuevas. I'll get his bio to you. He's the head of
Okay.
Georgia Power here locally.
And I know that Mayor Pro Tem want to nominate Mr. Douglas. Mayor Pro Tem, did you say for which seat? You want?
Okay, Councilor Davis.
Madam Clerk, I think I gave you a letter from Carmen Caveza requesting that he's got other matters that he'd like to take care of, so he will be resigning.
That is
And
correct.
I do know Alfred Blackmore with Aflac has a desire to serve.
Okay.
If you could get him a bio, I'd appreciate it.
I will. On our Employees Benefits Committee, we've outlined the seats that are coming up. Mr. Michael Burgess, a general government employee, he does not want to continue to serve. Mr. Lionel Hayes.
We have Councilor Thomas.
I'm wondering, Ms. Washington, if you could remind us, maybe between now and our next meeting when we vote on some of these, didn't we put some requirements on some of these positions that we wanted certain groups represented or something? Am I remembering the right committee?
You're talking about the
The
employees.
Employee Benefits
The Employee
Committee?
Benefits Committee, that there should be representatives of certain, would you get that to us so that we can make sure that as we are looking at potential nominees that we have that in
It
mind?
may be, in due time, it may be that's what this is, general government employee, department director, assistant director, so on and so
Well,
forth.
I just want to make sure that if we could, just send it to us and let us,
Right, I will.
to remind it.
I'll send
Thank
that out to you, Councilor Thomas.
Thank you.
Then on our Historic and Architect,
Could we nominate Lionel Haynes for Seth Brown?
okay. Are there any others who would like to renominate? Okay.
Okay, we can move for confirmation on Mr. Hayes and Mr. Seth Brown. And second, all those in favor, please state aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Want to move confirmation?
Do we move for confirmation? Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yes.
That's why I asked for some clarification to make sure that when we nominate these folks, we're nominating and we're doing the right category and all of those kinds of things. And if you're telling me that what's on here is the proper category with the proper numbers, that's okay. But
Councilor Thomas, I do believe that the agenda as outlined is correct, and that these individuals are serving in these specific capacity.
and if they're nominated today, they can be confirmed today?
Yes, excuse me, they can. But if the council desires to wait 1 week, we can hold off until our next regular meeting.
That's the proper procedure. Go ahead. I just want to make sure we follow the proper procedure.
I think we've had a few already approved.
Right.
And we don't have a motion on the floor for the others. Go ahead, Tiny, if you have additional information.
Yeah, we do have the data sheet, and the qualifications of the members states that the 5 members appointed by the council shall consist of 1 sworn officer from any public safety department, 2 members chosen from general government employees, and 2 department directors or assistant directors. The Director of Human Resources or his or her designee shall be an ex officio member of the committee. The Public Safety appointee shall serve for terms of 2 years. The General Government and Department Director appointee shall serve for terms of 3 years. All appointees shall be eligible to serve 2 consecutive full terms. Yes. Would you like to hold off, or should we move forward?
Yeah, well, we've got Haynes and Brown have been confirmed, but we can certainly hold off on Burgess and Burgess we're looking for and Drell Short until we can understand better what their positions were. Councilor Barnes.
No, that's what I was going to suggest, because
Yeah.
I do remember in conversation when we had everybody sitting out here, when we first started talking about that, you're right, we were talking about we needed to have adequate representation from all the departments in this here. And I feel more comfortable if, I know that you read it, that's good, but I just want to be sure that
If
we
you
are
like,
not.
I can let you know who those members are. Captain James Pope, who represents the Columbus Police Department, is a sworn officer from the Public Safety Department. Division Chief Marie Harrell represents the Fire and EMS Department. Mr. Michael Burgess, of course, he represents the general government employees, as well as Mr. Lionel Haynes with the Finance Department and represents the general government employees. Mr. Seth Brown, who is the department director. Ms. Sandra Hunter is the department director. Ms. Drell Short was selected by the general government employees, and Director Aretha Hollowell is an ex officio member and is a director. Ms. Pamela Hodge, finance director, also serves as the ex officio member.
Okay. Well, it sounds like at least one of those was elected. So do we have to send it back to the employees to elect again, I guess, as before? That's one thing we need.
That would be, yes.
Let's check on that.
And
Okay. How about, yeah.
Position.
How about, yeah. Yeah.
Who you pulling back?
I think Haynes and Brown are probably okay, but it's council's prerogative if somebody wants to, motion to. Elected.
And that is correct.
No, we haven't.
We haven't approved.
There hasn't been a vote.
No, but
There was no
wasn't a
vote
vote on
taken. You
it.
did make a motion, Councilor Allen, but no vote has been taken.
Okay. So unless, where we are now, let's go ahead and move forward because we're near the finish line here. We have approved Haynes and Seth Brown, Lionel Haynes and Seth Brown. That appears to be good, but if there's a motion to rescind that, we can certainly have it. Otherwise, we'll move forward in getting the clarification on the others. So we'll leave the floor open for a moment if somebody'd like to rescind that, or
I don't want to send them, but next week when it comes back, if this position is elected among the employees, we need to state that on the sheet.
yeah, it'll come back corrected.
Drill.
Drell was elected at the first time around. Now we just need to see if it needs to go back to the general government employees for election.
We will check that,
Okay.
Madam Mayor, and we will bring it back at our regularly scheduled meeting, not at the special call meeting on next week. On our Historic and Architectural Review Board, our Historic District resident has resigned, Ms. Rebecca Antribius. We will need another nominee for that seat. On a Personnel Review Board, Mr. Ron Mahoney is now deceased. We'll need a nominee for that seat. Recreation Advisory Board, I know that Councilor Woodson is working on a recommendation for her District 7 seat as well as District 8. Taxi Cab Commission, on our taxi cab driver representative, we are still working, trying very hard to get a replacement. On the tree board, we received recommendations for Mr. Chris Coakley, seat of Mr. Brad Huff, as well as Ms. Cassie Renfro for Mr. Steve Smith's seat, if council would like to nominate these individuals. Yes, I'll bring them back at our next regularly scheduled meeting. On our Uptown Facade Board, we've received a recommendation from Uptown Columbus of Mr. Allen Ud.
Got a motion and second for confirmation. All those in favor, please state aye.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I believe we had a request from we've got Councilor Huff.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we had some confusion during the last election cycle. So if you would, if it's possible, could we get Ms. Nancy Boren to come fourth Tuesday or first Tuesday next month, whenever it's convenient for her, to kind of update us and let us know. And I'll get in contact with her prior to.
Is it precincts, you mean? Some precinct questions? Okay, let's do that. And Mr. City Manager, do you want to extend an invitation to Mrs. Bourne for that?
Yeah. And is it possible to put her on your agenda so she won't have to stay all day? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. We have Councilor Barnes.
Just to remind the council and the viewing audience that at the Civic Center this weekend, is to stimulate. This is exciting. Columbus Makes It, along with Let's Grow Steam. It's an effort to encourage, and it's going to be huge, I believe, all the young people for the STEAM, the science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. It's just going to be a phenomenal get-together. It's going to be held at the Civic Center along with the ice rink, and it is free to the public. So I'd like to encourage everyone to come out and bring all our young folks to encourage their interest in the robotics that's going to be there and all the phenomenal things. So that's this coming weekend, and it is free to the public.
Thank you. Let's see. We have Councilor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I forgot, I got a call late last night, and there's at the corner of Piper and Perry, we've talked about the fact that there's an open ditch and the water kind of stands there, and the kids, apparently it's a bus stop, they stand right there. And the lady that lives right there asked if we could get the health department or somebody to spray because of the mosquitoes. Even though it's early in the season, they're already out there, and they were bad last year, so if there's any way to put it on a regular rotation, just to go by and hit that and try to hold it down for the kids that are standing by the bus stop. It's right by Home Depot, I think.
I called that in.
Yeah. Okay.
That's horrible.
Okay, Councilor Davis. We'll have that a referral, Mr. City Manager, as well to call it into the health department. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. City Manager, could you, maybe you already know, I don't know or not, but I know that the American Little League season has started, and that means it's about that time of the year. We're going to have a lot of concerns with traffic and pedestrians and all. I'm not sure where. I know the city was working on some measures to provide more safety there in the crossings. We're going to probably all start receiving phone calls here soon. I don't know where the city's at on that yet, but there was also a request for a handicap ramp at one of the facilities. They said there was no way for people in wheelchairs to be able to get down to watch the kids play. Now, I don't know where that's at either, but could you check on that for me maybe?
I'll have to check on that.
Maybe just shoot me an email or whatever and give me an update on that, or is it just a plan of action?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We had a request from the city attorney for an executive session on property acquisition disposition and litigation update. We've got a motion from the Mayor Pro Tem that we go into executive session in a second. All those in favor, please state aye. All right. Thank you. Please clear the chambers. All right, we are up and running again. We have just exited an executive session on property acquisition and disposition and also litigation, and no votes were taken. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion second. All those in favor, please state aye. Great. We will see you next Tuesday morning at 9. Thank you all.